Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Business of Art, the podcast that attempts to demystify business for artists. Today on the program, I have Cynthia Reeser, publisher of Aqueous Books and editor-in-chief of The Prick of the Spindle Literary Journal. I met Cynthia all the way back at LA Times Festival of Books back in April, and I'm so glad we got to have her on the program. Honestly, I thought we were going to talk a lot more about Aqueous Books, but it turns out that we spend almost all of our time talking about the Prick of the Spindle Literary Journal and what it takes to make a great literary journal, how to get your content ready for submission, the problems with submission, how to improve your writing, and a whole bunch of that stuff. And it was great. And I'm going to get to it in 1 second, but first, I want to thank our sponsors. Look, you like free, I like free, and we all like audio. So head on over to thebusinessofart.us/audible, and you can get a free audiobook today. That's thebusinessofart.us/audible. And while we're talking about Amazon-owned companies, our new book, Spaceship Broken Needs Repairs, is on Kindle Scout right now. And we already know you love free. And right now, if you nominate our book by going to spaceshipbrokenbook.com, and that nomination gets chosen by Kindle, you get a free ebook. You get a free ebook of the book for nothing. It takes 30 seconds. All you have to do is go to spaceshipbrokenbook.com, nominate our book, and enjoy. And with that, let's get on with the show. Tell us what you're passionate about, Cynthia.
I'm passionate about anything creative. I paint a lot, and, I sort of started doing that because it was something I'd always wanted to do, and I thought, I can't do that. I'm not good at it. It's really tough. It's sort of this this idea that people are just born with this natural ability to do it. But I'm never one to really let that stop me from doing anything, and I'm stubborn and hard-headed and, very persistent about things that I'm passionate about. So I just started doing it in, I think, 2006, 2007, and it's led to some interesting things. I was actually commissioned to paint a painting for a book cover. It was Todd Baker's Secrets of Men in a Lifeboat, which is a novel that just released in April, and I was also involved in editing and publishing that book. So it's been interesting. I love music. I'm in a band, and I also play the piano, which I've played it forever. Mostly classical music. I like to write my own music. And then, of course, I'm an editor. I started Prick of the Spindle, which is a literary journal, in 2007, and I'm still going strong with it. I redesigned the website about a year and a half ago. It's been interesting, but we have a lot of interviews and book reviews that are constantly going up, as well as a biannual print edition. And then professionally, I'm also an editor as well. So, I guess those are the things that I'm really super passionate about. I'd have to say, writing, art, and music are my big three there. So.
Isn't that incredible that, when you unlock sort of that creative side of your brain, nobody that I know who's a creative and, highly creative like you are, I am, has just one thing. I do art, I write, I'm an editor as well. So how did that all start? Let's rewind back to the beginning. And which of these creative passions were the first ones to sort of blossom, and how did those grow over time?
I love that you asked this question because I was about 9 when I started really, I had to play the piano. I had to. It was something that, my sisters and brother had. They were a lot older than me. They had lessons. And I didn't get lessons. I was the youngest child, and for whatever reason, I begged for lessons. I didn't get them, and just hearing them play, I was just wow. I mean, everything. I would hear them play, and everything would stop for me. I knew that this was something that I had to do, and being the youngest child, I wanted to be better than them. So I was really competitive about it. And, I said, well, I'm just going to figure it out for myself, and no concept whatsoever of how difficult it was. But I think that was good. But I took their beginner books, which they were way past those. So, I just sort of figured out somehow what notes on the paper corresponded with what notes on the piano, and it was. I took it from there, and I ended up majoring in piano performance when I started college. But it's just one of those things that I think it's been a driving force in my life. Music is my number one passion. It's so much a part of who I am. I think that it's just there's so much to it. If you're upset or dealing with anything difficult or happy, of course, you go and play the piano. And it's just this wonderful, I don't even know what I would call it. It's therapy, it's healing, it's, happiness and celebration. There's just so much in it. I think a lot of musicians would probably tell you the same thing. But, that was really the beginning of it. And I think, anybody who's creative, I think, we all have this creative sort of force that we're working with. Maybe I'm calling it the wrong thing, but I don't think it's limited to just one thing. So like you were saying, a lot of creative people will work in more than one medium, and I think it's just that desire to make something, or express yourself. And artists like Banksy, he's maybe a little more politically motivated, but that's the driving force behind his creative passion. Some of us just love, I don't know that all of us have, a single thing driving our creative passion, but I think, a lot of us just love to make something and to express ourselves, and I would say I fall in that category.
Awesome. And I call that being format agnostic. For me, we started as a comic book publishing company, and I never was a comic book person or a book person. I just liked writing, making stories and making things, and I would design these things, and just so happened that a couple of them in a row were comics, but then we also do novels and kids books and other works. And I assume this is sort of how you work as well, where like sometimes something comes up and it's a song, sometimes it's a book, sometimes it's a painting. Or how does your creative process work in that way?
I'm still not sure I understand it. I won't be so bold as to say that I do. I think that sometimes it's just idea driven. I'll have an image in my mind. If I want to do a painting, maybe I'll have an idea for something. I would think, well, what if I did something like this, or I could riff on something, out in the world and make it look a certain way. And that's the beauty of painting. I think, you're just working with visuals, and you can sort of, you can use visual metaphors, or, not anything as obvious as that. You can just, like Dali would turn things on their head. You have that freedom, a certain freedom in painting and visual art. In music, I'll just have an idea for a melody in my head sometimes, or I just feel like playing something on the piano, and I'll just sit down and say, okay, well, why don't I write something? But more often than not, it's a melody that comes to me. With writing, it's more for me, it's idea driven. You just have an idea about a story or a poem. Maybe some fragment of language comes to me, and that's usually a poem or a story. What if I wrote about this? And so, I think I'm not sure how I would really classify that. I don't know where it comes from. It's just, I think all coming from, excuse me, that same creative urge, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense to me, even though you're not defining it just by speaking it out loud. I totally get that. For me, it feels more like a compulsion than like a desire. But desire, compulsion, just the need to get that out onto a paper, or the want to get it out on paper or out into the world.
Absolutely. I think it's just you have this, you have something that pops into your head, and you're just motivated to do it, and you feel like you have to. So I know a lot of writers say the same thing. They're compelled to write the story. It's in them, and it doesn't really go away. They have to, and it's sort of. I think with a lot of writers, they'll have this idea and it germinates, and they just kind of work on it, and it doesn't really leave you. I've read about writers who've had ideas for books in their head for decades, and maybe that's rare, I don't know, but they'll just keep coming back to it, and maybe it evolves a little bit, and then they finally put it down on paper. It often turns out to be something great. So
yeah, absolutely.
But then there's the other side of it, where you just sometimes you have this compulsion of a single idea, and you just sit down and you write it, and it completely flows, and you probably know all about this, but, it turns into something else and kind of morphs and takes on its own form. So.
Yeah, that's my favorite part. That's why I grew up as a pantser when I was a writer, because like I never wanted to know what was coming next. But then when I started doing more outlining, which you have to do when you're doing more grandiose works or longer works, I was like, oh, well, I don't even know where it's going when I have the outline, because it sort of morphs and becomes its own thing even when you have a very tight outline, at least to me.
That's true. Yeah, I think, I've tried writing from an outline before, and, people tell me usually, I'm either a plotter or a pantser. But, for me, like, I guess, I tried plotting this novel out. It was my first attempt at a novel, and I thought, wow, this is a great idea. All I have to do is, sit down and write it. It'll be just like filling in the blanks, putting a puzzle together, and this will be so easy. And then I completely lost my motivation for writing it as I was doing that. So I think, there's my answer. I guess I'm a pantser more than anything. But
well, I don't think anyone's just one thing or another, right? I mean, like I still fall in the more pantser category because I want to be surprised by the book as much as everyone else does. I was just finished writing my last, not the novel that I wrote, that I just finished, that I'm editing now, but the last one. And about 200 pages in, I'm writing it, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a very interesting end of this chapter. I did not expect this to happen, and I was like so thrilled that like this thing that just flowed out that I didn't even know was happening until it actually happened. It was on the page, got out there, and that's the stuff that I love about writing. But there is certainly something to be said about at least having a guide so that when you get lost, you're like, what's going to happen next? Oh, this thing is going. Okay, so now I got to kind of write it back to like this next plot point, because if I don't hit this plot point, the next 10 plot points aren't going to make sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I think everyone's a little bit of, you just find your own method that works for you. I think it's always probably a good idea to have some vague idea of where you're going, but I'm sure there are writers out there who would discredit that idea completely. Maybe they just completely go with it. But, I really, when I'm reading novels, what I find that I love, right now I'm reading Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, and that's incredibly, he had to have planned that really well. I mean, of course, there are going to be elements of maybe plot or character development that are minor that are going to come up, and, you can fudge a little bit on those and work with it and just, fly free when you're writing it. But, wow, that it's so structured, and I admire it so much. But could I ever write anything like that? I have no idea. And I wonder, what his process was in writing that. So.
Yeah, I have the same sort of. There are things that I envy, but I'm glad I can't do. Like the people that can write, a 20-page dissertation about like the color of a chair and make it incredibly entertaining the whole time is a thing that like I'm just never gonna do. And I don't have the energy to do it. I don't have the literary talent to make something that long about such a tiny, minute detail interesting. And the other one is these like perfectly plotted like 2,000-page novels that have like 78 subplots that all perfectly come together. It's just that are told from 20 or 30 different perspectives. Like a Game of Thrones, like I would go crazy if I tried to do a book like that.
Yeah, that would be, I think, it takes maybe a certain mindset. I don't know what it is. I would love to decode that and understand, what is it that, drives these people. And I don't know, I think it's just it's so meticulous. But I really admire it. Don't know if I'd ever do it.
But then I'm sure there are things that they also, they may look at me and be like, I can't believe that someone can get that much emotion into like one paragraph. Or like they might say, man, I wish I could do like a short book of only 200 words, but as I write, it just becomes like thousands and thousands of pages. Which for me, the opposite is true, where, I'm like, I'm going to write a 400-page book. And then it gets to 400 pages, and by the time I'm done editing it, it's the same 250 pages that it always is. But all my books are either 250 or 300 pages. So I think maybe like the grass is always greener on the other side. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm sure there's things that different writers are good at, and you're better at one thing than you are at other. I'm great at anything creative and horrible at math, so that's kind of the way it goes. But
Right. So let's talk about how we met, which is from your publishing company, Aqueous Books. Is that how am I saying that properly?
yes, that's right.
How did that start?
It actually came sort of from my literary journal, Prick of the Spindle, which I started in 2007. I started Aqueous Books in 2010, partly to fill a need. I was finding that Prick of the Spindle is one of I think fairly few journals that publish a much longer form fiction. We publish anything from micro and flash fiction to novellas and novelettes, but I found that I was getting more formally novels, and I thought, I can't do anything with this. It's great. It's really great. I love it. It deserves to be published, but publishers are so saturated with wonderful submissions. They can't publish them all. It's a problem. I thought, well, if I did something like starting a company, I could help to address that problem on a very small scale. Of course, I can only there are only so many that I can publish, and that I had. It was kind of a thought of that in my mind for a while, and then I had one of my authors that I worked with the journal, Michael Atwood. He came to me and said, "Well, I have this novel. Have you thought about, publishing novels and longer form works? You're already, doing the journal." And I thought, well, let me think about it. But he was so persistent, and I couldn't really argue with his points, and he had some really good ones. And I said, well, why don't I give it a shot? And I will. And so Aqueous Books was born in 2010. And it's been interesting. We had reviews in Publishers Weekly fairly early on, and I thought, well, that's encouraging. That's really nice. I didn't really expect to crack them ever, and so some of our authors went on to win awards, and we actually published a book in 2012 by Kevin P. Keating, which was later picked up by Random House for their vintage imprint. So they ended up republishing that book and offered the author a 2-book contract. So I thought, wow, I guess I'm doing something right. So it was nice, but then I kept coming back to, well, the journal is really that's really where my passion is. I love that because I'm working with artists, and I can interview authors for that, and it's an ongoing variety. And now we have a print edition, so that's a lot of fun because I do the layout and find artists to feature in every issue. So it's just I think that's more of where my passion lies. And so but it's been good. It's been interesting. It's taught me a lot. And I've met some wonderful people, some wonderful authors, and made some great connections. So it's been interesting.
So I don't know a lot about literary journals, so I want to talk about Prick of the Spindle because that seems to be where your passion lies. And what do you look for in a submission to your literary journal?
It's so various. That's a really hard question to answer. On a very essential level, we're looking for, let's see, in poetry, I really like something that's fresh and inventive. Of course, you hear that, in any MFA program, make your language fresh, don't use cliches, etc. But, I think that's a good standby. If a poem can make me see something in a way that I haven't really considered before, then that's, it's really good, but it has to be, we get a lot of poetry that's, it's experimental, but it doesn't really have a driving purpose behind it. It's just experimental for the sake of being experimental, and that doesn't really move me. That's not to discredit it or to devalue it in any way. It's just not what we're looking for. But let's see, in fiction, we're looking for something that we love, character. Driven pieces, and we love the use of language if it's interesting or different, a story told in a way that really hasn't been done before. is always a plus. But most of ours are not like that because it's rare. We feel like everything's been done before. What is there new? But we for art, just really attention to form and I don't know. Art varies. It's so wide open. If you look at the art on our website, which is prickofthespindle.org, there's such a variety. We have painters and illustrators, photographers, and even woodcut and linocut artists and a sculptor. We're looking for more sculptors, so if any sculptors are listening to this, submit something, please. But it's just such a big variety. I think for art, if an artist is really, if they've found their comfort zone where they're good and they're at a certain point, I don't know how to put that into words quite, but I would say just have a look at the website, and also I uploaded the online archives. Those are in the process of posting. We actually published a quarterly online issue from 2007 to 2014. So we had 30 online issues, and all of those are almost up, everything but the poetry. So that should be complete by the end of the summer. And so, if anybody is interested in submitting, they should look at those and sort of get a feel for, what we're looking for. But it evolves. I would say if in doubt, submit. And we also publish film, a lot of short film. So, we're always looking for more of everything. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, historically, the literary journal was where people went to cut their chops, right? While they were once they've hit a certain level of talent in their craft, literary journals would carry them, and it would lead them into potentially, like you said, getting novel deals or honing their craft even more. Do you think that's still the case today, or do you think literary journals serve a different purpose?
I think it can be the case. That's a great question. I see a lot of, I think it depends on the journal too, because larger journals, poetry, and I won't mention anymore. I guess I really shouldn't, but you see really seasoned writers being published in those, and I think it's more to maybe to get shorter form work out. If you have a novelist that maybe writes a short story and they're publishing it in a large journal with a wide distribution, that's a good way for them to just keep writing and maybe writing towards a purpose. They want to get something small published maybe on the side while they're working on their next long project. I think it probably varies per writer, but the bigger ones are harder for newer writers to get into. But what I'm seeing a little bit more of a trend in is even those larger, more established journals taking a chance on less seasoned or experienced writers, which is wonderful. That was one thing that I was really passionate about when I started Prick of the Spindle, because I thought, it's really hard for writers who are good at what they do and deserving of being published if they haven't been published before. And at that time, that was maybe more so true than it is now. And so I thought, why don't I open up this avenue to writers with promise and talent who maybe just need a little bit of work and help on the edits. And so I think we're one of fairly few journals who will really work on a writer's work with, as far as developmental edits. If the core is strong, if it has good bones, we see that, but it needs a little bit of work. We're not afraid of that. My managing editor and I really work pretty hard on edits for every piece we publish. In the print edition, then I edit everything for the online version. But I think it's nice to see that trend towards allowing a home for anybody. It should be merit based. I've always believed that it should just be based on can you do it? Are you good enough to get published in the New Yorker? Regardless of whether you've published novels and whatnot before. So yeah, I think that we're very welcoming, but we've also published more seasoned writers as well. One who actually we interviewed recently, Josip Novakovic, who's a Guggenheim Award winner, and he was also a finalist for the Man Booker prize. He has actually a nonfiction piece coming up in our online edition to the air tomorrow. So, it's really nice to have that mix because it's giving credit to the other authors who are published in the journal. You have, on the one hand, you have these seasoned award-winning authors being published, in the same medium as these, newer writers. And, we've received amazing work from, I think she was 16, and she was a poet, and she, submitted the most beautiful work. And, I thought, well, isn't that nice? She would have a hard time getting published anywhere else. They would see that she's 16, which, she might not want to put that in her bio if she's submitting elsewhere. But, I thought it's just really nice. It's part of the reason we're doing what we're doing. So.
Awesome. So I like one thing that you said. I liked all the things that you said, but the good bones comment that you said before. I want to talk. You must get a lot of submissions, right?
Yes.
What kinds of things do you see across the board that authors get wrong when they're submitting to? Like, where are the biggest mistakes that people should be honing themselves, or the biggest problems you see in work that you don't accept?
That's a good question. There are so many different things. Of course, slush pile, you're always going to get the, sloppy work full of errors. And, if there are so many errors in something, it tells me that that writer was really not, paying much attention to it, or they didn't value submitting this piece. They didn't value their own work to begin with. And so, it's kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit, it's unprofessional, of course, but, I'd like to see writers who are, obviously paying attention to their craft and really working with it, putting, attention to the edits and, character development. We love that. And, but as far as, sometimes we get pieces that they don't feel finished. It's like the writer just gave up or stopped or lost steam and just, it's like, where's the ending? Or, the ending is, on the total opposite end of the spectrum. The ending is way too overwritten. So we get a lot of that. Or, maybe something's missing in the story, loose ends. I think these are probably all pretty obvious writer mistakes. But, we are seeing a lot of this sort of thing. And, my personal pet peeve really is expository language. It's not, you're not writing journalism unless you are, unless you're submitting an article or an essay, then sure. But, if it's fiction that you're writing, it's the old show don't tell adage. I mean, that's just burned into every writer's brain, I think. But, we get a fair bit of material that's just really, somebody did this and then they went there and then this happened, rather than writing it into scene. And it's just a really ineffective way to write. It's a great way to kill your story and to kill any editor's interest in it. I would say those are really the biggest.
Those are great. I can't believe that there are still people in 2016 who submit stuff that is full of spelling errors. I mean, it's the easiest thing to run something through spell check or Grammarly, and then learn a little bit about how to spell check, get some beta readers and get it right. I mean, a great story that has bad spelling and grammar, it just kills everything. Like, I refuse to read something like that when it comes in. I'll get maybe 2 sentences. If there's an error in the first 2 sentences, it's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel the same way, and I think all of my editors would say the same as well. It's telling me this writer isn't really, they're not trying too hard. They don't really care that much about getting published. For whatever reason, they bothered to submit it, But same for me. I'll read a submission, until I get to the point where I know that I would never publish it. So yeah, I mean, that's a big turnoff, to see so many errors in something, but there are exceptions, of course, but very, very few. I think, I'm thinking of one story in particular. I'm not going to name the title or the author, of course, but, it was submitted to us, and it was a brilliant story. It was very well written. We did end up doing pretty substantial edits to this piece, but it was more to clarify points and that sort of thing. But it had some spelling errors in it, which told me this author probably wrote it pretty quickly, but it was so good, I couldn't reject it. So all of the editors voted yes to this one, and so I accepted it. But that's a pretty rare.
Yeah, but that's
situation.
something like that's something becoming successful despite itself. I mean, in a slush pile of, I don't know how many you get. I get at least 2 to 3 a week. My submissions are closed, and I'm still getting 2 to 3 a week. I would assume you would probably get 50 to 100 a month on a slush pile. But even if you get less than that, you still have to get through that slush pile, and it has to compete with people you already know who've been in your journal, who are submitting new content, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So because you do want to keep a continuity going. Obviously, you have a high attention to quality and what you're publishing at any rate. So yeah, I mean the competition is very stiff, with our journal as well as any journal that you submit to, even the so-called little ones. I mean, we all want something that's high quality. So writers should always proofread and really think before they submit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like when someone submits to me a comic book and it looks like it was drawn by a 3-year-old, and it wasn't supposed to be drawn by a 3-year-old. Like, that wasn't the tone of the piece. And I'm like, this story could be great, but you didn't get past you didn't get past the other layers that I already have, which is I already have people I want to publish. I already have things on my slate. I already have books that I will publish even if I take a loss, just because I love the artist or the author so much that I feel like this needs to get out into the world. So like for you to get above the things on my publishing slate, the people that I know, the people that I love, this thing that you have better be so amazing. And if you can't if it's full of spelling errors or poor art, the story could be great, but you're still competing with all of these people that are already accepted. Like, even if they don't have a book, I know that if this guy finishes his book in time, I'm going to publish it because he's so good.
Absolutely. And, not only that, but the market is also so flooded. There are how many billion people in the world, I don't know, but, a lot of them are writers, apparently. Every journal is just inundated with submissions, more than, we could possibly publish. And, I think the same is also true of publishers. Everybody seems to have a novel or a manuscript out there that they want to get published. And, just if you don't do something to make yourself stand out, then, that's maybe a problem. It's going, you're not going to get published. But also, I think everybody should find what works best for them. And I see a lot of writers also trying to imitate other writers. And it's kind of obvious. Most of us at the journal are pretty well read, and we can spot that right away. So, I would say, to writers, my advice would be, do what you do as well as you can do it. Be your own best self, as a writer. So
you get a lot of people that submit that like maybe have submitted something poor and then submit a couple years later or 6 months later, and like you see their improvement over time until they are ready to be submitted or you are ready to publish them. Do you see that at all?
I do see that, and that's really rewarding. I love to see that. And when I see, pieces coming in that, I've seen improvement, or, maybe they've just submitted for the first time and it has potential, I always send, a personalized rejection saying, here's exactly why we're not going to publish this, but, feel free to work on these things. And if you address these things, then it would be publishable. We would work with you. So, but it's always nice to see writers evolving over time and, really actually getting better. Sort of on the other side of that, I do see a handful of writers who submit all the time, and they're not, despite some personalized feedback, they're not really getting better. They're not improving. They're just kind of stagnating. So don't be that writer. I don't know how rare that is or not, but I think that these are people that just they're writing a lot. I'm thinking of a few in particular. They're writing a whole lot, but they're not. The attention to quality is just not there. They're just. I think they're putting quantity over quality, and just sort of throwing something at the wall and seeing what sticks instead of really working on each piece and making it the best it can be. So that's been a bit of an issue lately, but it's nice that they want to get published in the magazine so much. I mean, that's great, sure, but I don't know really what to say to them beyond the personalized feedback we've already given. So, you always hope that they'll kind of, something will click one day and they'll say, okay, well, I'm still getting rejected even after 2 years of submitting every month, really. So, why don't I, work on this? And that would be nice. That's what you hope for them. But,
Well,
it's
how do
always
you get
wonderful.
how do you get through this thing? Because I mean, for me, I think success or like improvement comes from completing a lot of works and a lot of different works, and over time, you can't not get better. But it sounds like some people are not getting better after they do a bunch of different stories. So how do you think that you evolve from just spinning your wheels to actually making that improvement over time? Is it focused work, or what would you say to those people if you had them if you were talking to them right now in person?
I think it would be good to have some insight into their process and also what they want out of their writing, but more so the process. I think, if I know what you're doing, are you putting quality or quantity over quality? Are you just trying to, generate so many stories and see what sticks rather than really working on a piece? I would also say to those writers, read that journal that you're trying to get published in. Really read it. Subscribe to it. Read every issue for a year maybe, and then step back from your own writing for a while and just really kind of assess it when you come back to it and say, okay, what is it in this journal that they like? Can I spot a common thread? And how does my writing, and honestly assess, how does my writing stand up to this writing that they're publishing? And, don't take anything personally. Just simply move forward with an eye on, making your work the best it can be. And, maybe that journal's not right for you. Move on, read widely, find another journal that is right for you, and then start trying for them, but really read a lot of what they publish first.
I think that's so important for anybody, whether they're publishing something small or whether they're publishing a novel or a comic book, is to really look at the publisher and see if you're a good fit, because not everything is a good fit for every publisher. In fact, most things are terrible fits for most publishers. And if you're just in that sort of method of, I just want to get published to validate my life or that I'm a good writer, you're going to end up being published by a publisher who may not even specialize in the thing that you specialize in, who may not have an audience that cares at all about what you're doing. And you're giving a lot of yourself away. You're giving a lot of your attention away, and you're giving a lot of your life away that you worked on this major work to publish with a publisher who may not be a good fit for you. And I think that's a very powerful thing, not just for a literary journal, but for anyone, is really study what that publisher puts out, whether it's a magazine, whether it's a book publisher or a comic book publisher, even if you're writing movies or television. Like, really focus, because they all have a taste, like a kind of taste and a kind of thing they want in their books or in their articles. And if you're not following that, you're just going to keep hitting your head against a wall, even if your work is great.
That's absolutely true. I think a lot of writers get impatient too, and they just think their writing is good, and maybe it is, but maybe there are things about it that aren't very strong and could use improving. But I think a lot of us as writers have those ideal journals or publishers that we want to publish us because we love everything they release. We love their aesthetic or whatever it is. I have them. Everybody has them, I think. But in terms of assessing your own work, and asking yourself, does it measure up to these guys, and especially if they've rejected you in the past, and I think it's important to really take a long just a step back from even your writing for a little while and do more reading. I think it's incredibly important for writers to also be readers, because you're absorbing techniques and structures and different things about the writing, maybe even uses of language that maybe you hadn't thought about before, or maybe haven't encountered before, and it's always going to stretch you as a writer if you're also reading. In my MFA program, we had to do a lot of reading. We had to annotate books too, which was really just to make sure we were reading them. But it was really good for us too to be able to spot things, techniques that this writer was using in their work that maybe we hadn't thought about before, or how could it apply the technique, of course, not the actual writing, but how would it apply to our own writing? Could we use it to help our writing? Is there anything that we're stuck on or struggling with that we could apply some of these techniques to work in our writing and help it move forward a little bit? So it's just incredibly important to read widely, I think, for writers.
I think that's so important. I get into a lot of conversations on Twitter, and one of the main questions I ask is, how many books do you read in a year? And whenever someone says, I don't read that much, I'm mostly focused on my own book, I'm like, oh, that book's not going to be very good then. It just can't be, because, yes, you have to, while you're writing a book, you have to read less because you only have so many hours in a day. But, if you're completely shutting out reading while you're writing completely, it's going to reflect in your work because, like you said, every single book that I've ever read has given me some little technique on how to do something and be like, oh, that's a great way to, fix this plot I'm stuck on in this book, or to get from one panel to another. And I'm actually surprised at how many writers are not readers as well.
I am too. I'm thinking back again to the MFA program I was in. We actually had some writers who just completely dismissed the idea of, or really bucked up against it and said, why do we have to read? We're here to write. And, it seems obvious to, a lot of us, but, then you would see the instructor saying, okay, here's why. So, and those were often, the writers with the work that wasn't quite as strong. And, so you're seeing, just looking, this is a broad generalization, but just looking at really wonderful writers, they're also really well read. So I think it's absolutely crucial because you're looking at what a publisher is interested in publishing, or if it's historical, you're looking at, maybe you're comparing it with what's being published now. It's good on so many levels. So
yeah, absolutely. So we have to work towards wrapping up. But before we do, I want to hear about. We talked a lot about your books and what you're doing, but tell us what we can look forward to in the near future from Aqueous Books, from Prick of the Spindle, and from you yourself.
Oh wow, okay. So I just finished writing a manuscript. It's actually poetry. And so it's kind of out there in the world a little bit. So I'm, looking for publishers for that, but it's actually in a couple of competitions right now. So I'm hoping for that before I really start trying to get it published through other publishers. But I just finished a short story collection as well. So those things kind of wrapped up about the same time. But for Prick of the Spindle, we have a beautiful print edition, which we fairly recently revised to be full color, and it's just gorgeous. And you can find us on prickofthespindle.org. My personal website is cynthiareeser.com. Aqueous Books is aqueousbooks.com. So Aqueous just released a book in April from Todd Baker. The book is called Secrets of Men in a Lifeboat. It's really wonderful, and it's interesting because Todd was actually an executive film producer for Miramax, Disney, Paramount, a couple of other places I'm sure I'm forgetting. But it's interesting to read that novel, and you can see the filmic influence in that. So I think that pretty much sums up all of the things going on with me. And of course, I'm continuing to paint as well. And so.
And you painted that cover, right?
Yes, I did.
All right, awesome. Well, we're going to get out of here on this. Give us a final piece of parting advice, how we can get in touch with you online, both social and websites, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay, sure. Let's see, parting advice. I would say never give up. If there's something that you want, just keep working at it, making it better and shaping it until it's as good as it can be, and just don't give up. There's a lot of competition out there, so you have to be really persistent. And then you can get in touch with me through Prick of the Spindle. It's prickofthespindle.org, aqueousbooks.com, or cynthiareeser.com. And Prick of the Spindle is on Twitter. We're Prick O the Spindle without the E at the end on Twitter. We also have a Facebook page.
So that was Cynthia Reeser, and I hope you learned a lot from that episode. I know I did. In putting together my anthology, I had a lot of questions and still have a lot of questions, and this helped answer a lot of them. Before we get out of here, I want to thank our sponsor. Today, let's choose me. Is your business struggling? Do you want it to grow massively? Then head on over to russellnolte.com and book a free 30-minute strategy call today. That's russellnolte.com and book a free 30-minute strategy call today to help your business explode. And if you want a free book, and who doesn't want a free book, head on over to spaceshipbrokenbook.com and nominate our book on Kindle Scout. If it's chosen, you get a free copy of our ebook just for nominating it. It takes less than 30 seconds. So head on over there today. And with that, wannabes and creators, I will see you next time. Have a great day.